Who's going to have the best developed project? That's the competition. I mean, it's not a guarantee for a green light, but it is as close as you can get to a guarantee, right? You know, they're going to buy X amount of projects and they're only going to make Y out of those X. And the path forward lies in development. That's the horse race here. We see it as an integral part of the process, and that the writer is the most important person on the show, the showrunner, writer. We find it a little odd that the woman or the man that we rely on the most creatively are nowhere to be found. These are the person who spent the last couple of years with us getting this done and telling this story, and now they're not around. And everybody wants to make an unforgettable show, a show that people talk about around the world, that when you mention it, people are like, oh my God, I love this. My wife won't stop talking, whatever. That's what we want.
Alon Aranya, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
You're such an impressive human being. You have made some of the most fantastic television on the planet over the last 10 years. Let's just do a bit of a name check. Tehran, Your Honor, starring Bryan Cranston, Hostages, The Vanishing Triangle, and I'm just touching the surface here. What's really interesting, though, that I want to talk about today is in 2018, you made a decision to launch Paper Planes with a deliberate intention for it to be an international company. Honestly, you make it look easy. So I want to talk about how you do that, why you do it, and also really take this opportunity to explore your view on the Australian screen industry and how we can better position ourselves to compete in this increasingly global market.
Okay, we got a lot to cover. Here we go. I've been producing in the U.S. for about 15 years. And even when I was just focused on the American market and producing American shows, they were literally all of them were based on IP, on scripted formats that came from outside of the U.S. So my whole sort of DNA of my producing career started with dealing with IP from the international market. My focus as a background as a writer, too, has been development. It's at the core of what I do. I mean, I'm a producer, of course, but first and foremost, I am a developer in my heart of hearts, right? I'm a story guy. Everything is seen, and I run my business through that lens, for good and for bad, but that is the lens in which I operate through. And that is exactly what drove me into the international market. The idea that I could help and I could come together with other producers and writers overseas and use my experience to possibly, help enrich the process of development and work, constructively with all the creatives around there. And hopefully, because we're just coming at it from different places and different experiences, putting our heads together is going to elevate that product, is going to make that show a little more special, possibly, and more developed than what may normally happen under those circumstances locally. It was an idea. It was a theory, a thesis, if you may. We had to test it. One of the first projects that came my way was Tehran. The first episode was written and the pitch was great and the script was not there yet. And I honestly thought, well, here's a great case study to take on. And we got into it and developed it and financed it, co-financed it. And, we made the show and it absolutely took off. Apple TV bought it and in fact was the first international show on Apple TV, and also won the Emmy for Best International Drama.
Development has been such a big issue that we've talked about a lot in the Australian market. We, will get greater quality in our scripts, which are the strong foundation for everything, if we develop more. So I would just love to talk to you about the nuts and bolts. Like when you say great development, what does that look like in the day-to-day?
I'm a developer first and foremost, and I honestly believe that everything depends on, number one, what you choose to develop. I sit many times with some of my colleagues and new colleagues in different territories, and they pitch me some of the shows on their slate. And I'm like, wow, maybe I don't know enough about the market, but I wouldn't make any of these shows. I'm fascinated by what people, first of all, what producers or writers or executives, what they choose to develop at any given point, at any given marketplace. Because I think behind that question lies a big thing, which is also not only experience and development, but also taste. There's a certain amount of taste that goes into our work. And it's reflected also in the body of our work. What is the kind of stuff that we chose to take on? The primary purpose of American producers is to be creative producers, to develop the property, to develop the show, to bring the auspices together, and to package that show, to bring it to the studio, to the streamer, and then to execute it mostly from the creative standpoint, because at that point, you hire line producers and you hire everybody. Most of the focus of American producers at any given point is a creative focus. And that's what is expected of us. And therefore, we wake up in the morning, and for me, my entire existence is, what am I going to develop and how am I going to develop it, right? I don't find that to be always the case overseas. I think that overseas, outside, I'll say the US and, to a certain degree, the UK, it's a little different. A lot of the producers, first of all, let's start with the fact that the production companies are assets, are actually business entities, and have the potential of being worth a lot of money if they do their business right. At the same token, if they don't run the business right, they will go under and they will close down. It's interesting because the background of producers overseas tends to be a much more diversified background. A lot of them come from production itself, from physical production, from being possibly first ADs and production managers and line producers, lawyers as well, or people who worked in sales and distribution. So that created a different landscape that it feels like the main purpose of producers is slightly different. It's to run a business overseas. And there's different considerations in doing that, which I completely understand. So I think producers come to it from a different place. And that's the whole thing about development. Of course, there are producers that don't come from that background, but have a very good feel for it and respect it very much. But mostly a lot of producers that don't come from that background don't entirely understand the process, don't entirely understand the difference between one draft and the next draft, and how to improve a script, how to get it from something that feels generic or not there yet on different levels, and how to get it to be a piece that really works. And that's a craft, a show in the US has an ecosystem. It's not only the writers. I mean, I think it's really dodging the whole conversation if people just think, well, in America, they have these great showrunners. Yeah, we have amazing writers and very experienced writers and great showrunners, but we also have an ecosystem around them. And that ecosystem includes great developers writers can rely on as a support system, as a creative support system that really shepherds shows creatively in a very smart way. So again, there's a whole ecosystem here that helps these shows get where they need to go. And that's not taking away from the creators. It's just to say, as we like to say in the US, and I think in other places, it takes a village, right? Most of my time is spent in development because I'm developing a lot more project probably than will actually be greenlit. Just, generally speaking, that's kind of how the game works, right? So inevitably, you're spending much more time in development. Our job is to get it greenlit. That's our biggest job. I'm not saying that what comes after is not none of our job. Oh, it is. But we have to get it greenlit. Getting a show greenlit is what makes us executive producers, the owners of this thing, the great visionaries of these things. We were here first, many times to have the property or the idea, and I'm then bringing the writers. So I was there even before the writer. The path to me to greenlighting a show is development. It's very simple, and there is no way around it. And gosh, I've seen so many people in the industry try to go around it. The other problem with development is that it takes a long time to really, get a grip of it. It's not like a crash course over a weekend. And that's part of the problem, that in the rush of with the streamers going out to the world and COVID, and it was at the same time that Tehran was sold to Apple. I think there was this thought that, if they're going to pour a bunch of money out there and make a bunch of content, that it was all going to help get subscriptions. And the problem was that you couldn't buy that knowledge overnight. And a lot of the shows that were made or developed during that time were just not good enough. And you could pour more money into it. It's still going to take hiring the right people, training them. It's years of focus of transitioning an industry a little bit more in that direction. So I don't think there's any overnight pop-up solution to this, except start with the fact that you're focusing on this. Start with the fact that our industry is called scripted TV, scripted television. It's actually in the headline. It's like it's in there. So any attempt to undermine the script, to be annoyed by the fact that it needs another draft or another polish or another this, is simply not respecting the name of our industry. And if, I always think that if somebody is so annoyed with the script, go work in non-scripted TV. I mean, we're supposed to be excited about telling a story here. And we're supposed to fight for that story being the best it can be told. And it seems like sometimes there's a conflict between running a business, and sometimes that gets in the way of doing a proper development work. It's many times rushed. And I have compassion for business reasons why it's rushed, but it shows up.
So you've got a piece of IP, or you've pitched a show, you've got it up. What are the practicalities of how you develop?
Look, I work with writers both in the U.S. and overseas, and it's different experiences depending on the writers. And colleagues have this idea overseas that if you work with American writers, all your problems go away. Everything is perfect, no problem. Now, it's not entirely wrong in the sense that they're very good. A lot of them are really good, very impressive writers, just a joy to work with. And they do bring in high level of work. But do they still need direction? Yes. Do they still need notes? Absolutely. Do the good ones know how to spot a good note and rely on it as a support system? Absolutely. All the best writers that I work with were really jotting down all the notes and really excited about good notes. And me too, by the way, as a producer. If somebody next to me says a good note, I'll crack a bottle of champagne open. I'm like, wow, that was awesome. Because I'm a story guy. If somebody had a better idea on it, I'm the first one to celebrate. I'm like, let's go out for a drink. I want to have more of these conversations with you. So this is about getting the best story here. It's not a competition, but it happens to be that when we work overseas, and a lot of the projects that we do, we end up having many more notes than our partners, sometimes and many times even more than the broadcasters that we work with overseas. And it's okay for me, because to me, it doesn't matter, again, who's the party that's giving the notes, but it creates some challenges, because sometimes our partner's like, I don't understand. They don't want anything, you being so difficult. Again, back to square one, the whole relationship to the script. It's like trying to get out of it as quick as possible. And if the broadcaster doesn't have any notes or not big mud, then that's it. Yay, we're out of here. But it's really the blind leading the blind. If we find ourselves in a situation that we're developing a show overseas and we're rushed into production, which happened to us on one of our shows that we did overseas, and it was a terrible mistake. We caved in, learned from that experience, and it didn't have to be that way. But again, you understand why these things happen, because people that are operating it on the ground are not mindful for the creative process, and they think they can just kind of wing it as they go along. Too many other factors are determining a green light, and not, is the script ready? Many shows get greenlit way before these scripts are ready. I'd like to think that in a way, we take more of our time in the U.S. because we can. It's a different system. The writers are getting paid more, so they're to do more. So for all these reasons, we get a healthier, sort of richer development process that we have the patience for, because we have to, because that's the competition. The competition is, in a way, who's going to have the best developed project? It's not a guarantee for a green light, but it is as close as you can get to a guarantee, right? That's our job. I mean, they're going to buy X amount of projects and they're only going to make Y out of those X. And the competition is to be included in that group. So, and the path forward lies in development. That's the horse race here. I'd like these commissioners to read our developments and go, wow, this feels like a whole other level. And if we can get that, then we're doing our job.
Actually, it makes sense in terms of the business model.
That's why I say my focus is the green light. I don't want to say that I'm standing at a green light and go, well, my job is done here. No, of course not. There is casting and the look of the show and every creative aspect of the show and post-production and everything. But it's just to say that now there's money and there are scripts and everything falls in place and you have to sort of navigate it right. But there's a lot of people that are hired to do that job and to navigate with you. But on the way to the green light, when I looked to the right and I looked to the left, I didn't see so many people around me because there wasn't a budget and it was me and the writer and maybe another producer or whatever, it was just 2, 3, 4 people. That's it. And that's why I think that is the biggest task. How do you get from 4 people to 140 people working on the show under a budget? Why did that become the harder part? And the green light somehow developing, yeah, let's go. I got a whole crew to run here. But the essence of the business happens from 0 to green light. I know that I call any buyer today in the U.S. or any big colleague in the U.S. and they immediately call me back because they always say the same thing. You have great taste. I love every time you call. It's something awesome. Whether I can do it or not, I'm still I'm calling you back immediately, right? And that's the reputation we want on the original side when we're developing stuff on the local market. I want every commissioner, every head of drama possibly, and every place that we work to know that when these guys show up, they show up with something yummy and very good and well-baked.
What is your approach to giving notes?
The approach is, how can we help make this better? It's an objective process. It doesn't mean we're all going to always agree on everything, but when a note makes sense and resonates, the smart people in a room get it. They get it quickly. And the less experienced and less secure people or insecure people struggle. So first of all, just as an approach, we see as it a constructive. I'll tell you a little story without mentioning any names, but we developed a show in Europe, and with an international partner as well. And I remember getting the first document from the writer. I think it was the outline for the first script, or maybe it was even the pitch document. I forget what it was. We put a bunch of notes in an email and sent the notes in. And the writer writes back, and the email starts with, "I got your critique." And I was just laughing because I was like, well, that's a very, in a way, manipulative way to cancel notes, right? I don't have to listen to critique. That's like a critic in the paper, a reviewer or something. And I had to call and say, we need to straighten something out. This is not about critique. This is a support system. And unless you view it that way, I don't know how we'll be able to develop a show together, right? Because you have to view me as somebody that is here to make you look much, much better, as best as possible. I'm here to help you make the best out of your act. That's my job. You have to come to the table and understand that there's a producer who understands writing. I'm never going to be my way or no way. It's a conversation. It's an absolute conversation. I can have a note about something that the note will be absolutely right, but the writer will have a different way how to solve that note. And that's absolutely fantastic. I'm not here to dictate the way the notes need to be solved. I think writers should do that part, quite honestly. But I often suggest stuff, and I don't mind suggesting it, especially just as an example. And I always say, maybe that's not the best example, but here's what I mean. Right. But it's about having the conversation, opening up these distinctions, going, let's look at what's happening on page 31. because we got to talk about that scene, and then we talk about that scene. Now, again, I can tell you certainly that writers take my notes many times and completely attack them in a different way here than what I initially thought. And when I read it, I go, huh, that's smart. I didn't even think about attacking it that way. Good for you. Love it. Done. Next. It's really about, let me try to highlight for you stuff that I can see that maybe you can't see because of the process. When we read the scripts that we work on, we read it with so much love. We read it more than once, of course, every draft, and we discuss it internally, and we passionately and argue and this and that, even before it gets to the writer. We don't look at it as some technical thing we got to get through to the next thing. It's like, this is what we wake up to. This is the work. I got to tell you, like, I'm a development nerd. I'm a development nerd in the sense that when I get off a notes call and the writer like pitch, the solutions for the notes or whatnot, and they were great. I'm just like, that's, to me, like, that was like, that's high for me. I celebrate that day. I had that like a couple of weeks back. Like, we got off a call, me and the other producer were like, oh my God, that was amazing. I'm like, yes, in development nerd land, that was like awesome. And like, most people would find that to be like boring on some level. And we're like, can you believe what they did with that twist that we see? That's so amazing. Yeah. We get excited over story. We get excited about telling a good story. And we get excited that writers are taking on the notes and making it their own and then bringing that great solution. It feels like a great harmonic process. So that's what it's about. And it's about, there's a reason why they said writing is rewriting, because it's mostly rewriting most of the time. And somehow writers come in with a first draft, lay it on the table and go, believe me, it's perfect. It's good. And we're like, no, it's not. It's not everything you said, and stop saying it, because you don't get to declare it. It's, again, it takes work. It's a craft. Let's think about it in a different way. In film, because it's one unit of drama, it's one script, over the history of film making, there were many, many incidents of young filmmakers that came out of film school or made their first feature ad while they were at film school or immediately after film school. And that went to a huge festival and won awards and got their career going and got distribution, and they became hot shit overnight at the age of 25. That happened. That happened more than once and more than twice, and every country has some version of those stories. Never happened in TV, ever. Nobody came out of film school and wrote 8 episodes like Mad Men. Just never happened. I have not seen it. Everywhere I go, I say, I'm asking anybody, please show me somebody in their 20s got out of film school and knocked it out of the ballpark TV on their own. Doesn't exist. I mean, you could get anybody to read once one unit of drama, but you can't send somebody, hey, can you read my season? I got 8 scripts here. So it shouldn't be a problem. It should take you a couple of weeks. What's the problem? Wait, can't help me? No, just a couple of notes on each episode. No. It's a craft because it's 8 episodes or 6 or whatever it is. It's a craft. It's almost like writing 8 features, even though it's not the length of a feature. But imagine that every script and every episode needs to perform like that feature. It's not like, well, it's episode 3, so everybody can relax and just, don't worry about the script. If you saw great shows like Mad Men and Breaking Bad and Sopranos and shows like that, every episode, it was like a feature film. Shorter in time, but a feature film in its bravado. And so that's really hard to achieve. Really hard. And it's a craft. It's a combination of talent and experience. And that's why it's hard. It's not like in film where the producer can rely much more on the writer just to do their thing. And then the director will come in and rewrite that one unit of drama because everybody can handle that one unit of drama. But then when that system switched over to serialized TV and producers use the same system where the director will come in and rewrite, don't worry, it's all going to work out. And you're like, wait, what? Rewrite what? The 8 episodes? Oh, and then they start calling directors showrunners overseas, completely changing the terminology on it and what it means, because it was always the main writer and the creator of the show. So all of a sudden directors became showrunners, and a bunch of people became and producers became showrunners, and people who don't really have the craft down of that, they can't sit and write those 8 episodes on their own. And somehow they are tasked with executing the show. I'm not saying it can never work ever, 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 but definitely not as a system. We see that everywhere. It's like the writers write, then they go home and write a different project. Then the director comes and they do the show that they want. The writer isn't there, not nowhere close to be found. Again, I'm not saying there's different systems. It's not surprising that we find it a little odd that the woman or the man that we rely on the most creatively are nowhere to be found. These are the person who spent the last couple of years with us getting this done and telling this story, and now they're not around. Really? This is going to work? You sure? None of the people that wrote this, that know what they're doing, no, they're not going to be here.
When you put it that way, that does not make sense at all.
I've had directors come in after we spent 3 years developing a show and with the whole thing and they're saying this and that. And the first thing I had to say, I was like, I'm sorry, were you here for the past 3 years? Because I was, and I don't remember seeing you. So first of all, when you speak to us, that the people who were here for all these years that got this thing here, you need to get in line with what we're doing here. So I think somehow in the process of trying to jump into serialized TV fast, as it was growing fast with the streamers, different methods from the film world were adopted in TV in the hopes that they can do the job. And because there was nobody else that could do the job, many countries were stuck between generations. They had an older generation of TV writers that knew just how to do these procedurals, kind of classic TV, and they didn't really, and the young writers who didn't have the experience to really write seasons of television. So all of a sudden they turned to filmmakers as a way to fill in that gap, to director writers, to people who could create worlds and do that. And so they thought, well, maybe that's going to do the trick. And of course, that's not really doing the trick. I don't want anybody thinking I'm here to ignite anything. Everything I say is because I really do understand all the players that are involved in making a TV show. So everything I try to say about these things is hopefully out of the attempt to understand all the players. I think that for different reasons, we are living in a world where American writers are getting paid way, way more than writers overseas. It's, of course, some kind of reflection of the budgets that we work with versus overseas. But the gaps are so big that one has to wonder, do they need to be so big? And I'm not talking about lowering the American writers' fees. I really think that generally speaking, as an industry, as an international industry, I think we need to look at how much we're paying writers in scripted TV. Many places have one rate, one size fits all, but I'm pointing out to the general factor that if a writer is getting paid very little, and they have to write a bunch of shows in one calendar year to survive financially, and as a result, and they're not getting paid to spend time on the set of their show, ultimately we're weakening the show. A decision that was made along the way that this is how a budget looks like, and each local market has a budget. That's what we're accustomed to paying a writer. That's what we're accustomed to paying camera department. This is, that's just historically how it's been. Okay, why can't we change? Why can't we change some of it? Why aren't we Why are we stuck with these formulas like it's the Bible? I'm saying it as a producer. I'm not a producer who's looking to get rid of the writers. I'm a producer who wants to have the writers around to help execute the show on a creative level, on the best level we can. I don't want to need to call them in the middle of the night and go, what did you mean when you wrote that thing? So I think we have to look at the fact that we are trying to get away with paying as little as possible to writers. I'm not saying that all writers are equal, and certainly there are writers that don't have the experience, and there's a price range for every level of experience, and there should be. I don't feel that's the case in many countries. I feel like the range is very narrow, and whether you're at the top of your game or the more at the beginning of your game, it is not reflected in a massive range. And so people say, well, we don't have that kind of money. And I will say, I understand. Again, I understand all sides, but I will say, then let's look at what we spend our money on any given show. I mean, I rather shoot less places and less locations and even shut down certain days of production. If I can pay writers more and have a better show, fine, let's shoot less days and find something smarter to shoot, as long as it can be premium. You know, what do I care if I have more budget and I'm spending it on more shooting days, but the script is not great. So the result doesn't really matter. It doesn't add up. I mean, that's why In Treatment from Israel was so massive, because it was literally two people in a room. But the writing was amazing. Amazing. I mean, wow. Just like really stripped the idea of you don't need anything. You just need two people in a room with amazing writing. And we're chasing these monies to have bigger locations and we don't get it. We don't get it. It's like we're skipping over and over this development process, this script process. And so I think generally when I look at the international market and I look at the writers, and yes, some of them have less experience and so, but I think that we have to start transforming the way we pay them and what we want them, and having them more as partners along the way. It's certainly the experienced ones, the ones that have a knack for producing a little bit, that they can be on set too and help with executing the show. They're not a threat to the director. They're not a threat to the producer. They need to be part of this group. It's a village. It takes a village to make this thing the best. What if they sat there and go, you're all forgetting that this and this and that? And what if that idea saved us from hell in post-production because nobody around was thinking about that story thing that doesn't make sense? Somehow it escaped everybody, but that didn't escape the writer. So I'm just saying, it's like, that's why you want a bunch of eyeballs on these frames when you're making them. And this idea that you don't need anybody, I'm just going to cut down so I just have the bare essential. Again, it ends up working against the show. So I'm just saying there's always a shortage of money everywhere we go. Also in America, there's a shortage of money. It's not like people are just pouring money at you. Everywhere, there's always an issue with money. But the one thing in America you can't say is that, it all came at the expense of the writers. It's like we take care of that, not only because we have the WGA here and forces of nature like that, but because, we see it as an integral part of the process, and that the writer is the most important person on the show. There's no other way to do it. So again, not talking about American prices. That's not the same marketplace, but every market has to think about how can we construct this a little different to work better for the show, and what do we maybe need to cut from different places to add to this department if that's what it's going to take. Because I don't understand what department is more important than the writing and development department. I really don't quite understand which department is more important in the scope of things, because without this department, you're not going to get the green light. So who cares about back to square one? Everything after the green light is after the green light. Do you know how hard it is to convince people to make shows, and how hard it is to look at an empty page and start a development of 8 episodes for them to be on a level that you will think at the end of the process that I just didn't waste now 4 years out of my life for nothing? It's hard. That's the hard part. If we get that location or that location, it may make a difference, of course, but it will never ever make the same difference as how strong the script is. And I think we have got to give that more focus on the producerial side in order for the local shows to feel more premium and for them to better compete outside the territories, if this is what the producers want. Netflix wants their shows to succeed, first of all, in their local markets. That's the approach, because it needs to generate subscriptions. That is completely understandable. That is their model. I hope that we can make shows, even together with Netflix, in these local markets that will do both, right? That will be very successful for their local markets, and then also be able to travel outside of their local markets, right? Especially with global platforms, just like Fauda did, just like Tehran did, just like Casa del Papel did, and other shows obviously Lupin and Call My Agent, and, the list goes on. So
And
it's
Korea's
possible.
success as well. Can we talk about the global
Yeah.
market in terms of, firstly, what's changing, but also how do you find shows that have that local integrity and also global appeal?
If somebody's pitching me a French show or a German show, I'm not German, I'm not French. So it's good that I'm not, in the sense that, let's see how it comes at me, and if I'm interested in that story, because I'm not baked in, right? I'm not from your country. And even if it's based on a true story, good for you. It still doesn't mean anything for me. So let's see if you can really hook me with this story as a global citizen, not as one of your residents. And that to me is really the beginning of a test. If somebody's telling me a story from their country and I find it to be like, wow, holy shit, like that, then I understand it has the same impact on me. And it doesn't matter that it happened somewhere else. When I read the first 2 episodes of Your Honor, the original version in Israel, written by Shlomo Mashiach, such a fantastic writer, and we started making Your Honor in the U.S. while they were developing still in Israel. When I finished the 2 scripts, my heart was pounding, and I thought, there isn't a place on the planet that this story wouldn't work. It has all the great elements so it affected me, not as an Israeli at all. It affected me as a global citizen. There's a judge in every country. There's a hit and run in every country. And there's a father and a son in every country. And there's a father protecting a son in every country. And everybody on this planet will understand this story and why it's so brilliant. And now Your Honor is on to its 14th adaptation. 14 adaptations around the world. Many times I'm asked, like, how do you choose a story, this or that? And I'm like, we're pretty simple in a way, right? It's like, it's taste, and it's like, would I watch this show? Do I want to watch this show? I will not make a show that I don't want to watch. No matter what it is, I'm fascinated by it, and I really want to see it. That's it. That's in a nutshell, Into that, there are a lot of story distinctions and a lot of stuff that I scan for when I'm reading any pitch document to, really understand, is there an engine here for a show? Is this show can really return for multiple seasons? Does it have that capability, right? Does it have that great protagonist that can really carry that show? And do we care about them? And are we excited to walk in their shoes and walk with them and go on their journey? So, I mean, there's a bunch of these distinctions, dramatic distinctions that we look for. But in general, it's like, you want to, finish reading a script and go, wow, I couldn't stop reading this. I could feel it. it's in my body. It's under my skin. That's what happened with Your Honor. It was like, it got under my skin. I rushed back to the US. I'm like, I got a project. And they said, what is it? Show us the episodes. I'm like, there are no episodes. Okay. What do you have? I'm like, nothing. My excitement. Here it is. I'm going to pitch you the show. And that's what it was. I came in, it's this, it's that, and everybody's like, okay, we'll do it. And it was like, okay. But it really,
and you sold that show on just the deck, right? And the scripts that
there was no
you have
deck.
access.
There was nothing. No, I mean, in the sense that they were scripts in Hebrew, and I decided not to translate them that moment. And I just wrote a couple of pages of a pitch, just to have something on paper so it doesn't really feel that loosey goosey. But literally, it was just my pitch. So, which it was the show, but, put in my words. And, Your Honor is such a great case of like why I love to do what I do, because the pitch is so powerful. It's so powerful that it was amazing. Like, you pitched it to the best people in this business, and after 5 minutes, you could see on their faces, not only did they get it, they completely appreciate it and they understand the power of it. And you see that power happening in front of your eyes. You see people like Peter Moffat and Bryan Cranston and Robert and Michelle King come on board in minutes from hearing about it. And that's what I work on every day, is to get to these moments where you can stand with somebody, hand them this exciting, share with them this exciting pitch. Our job is to come up with these exciting proposals that are great stories, and to share them, and to build this village which is what it's going to take to make the show. And I love it. I love every part of it. I love starting with the writer. I love building the village around the writer. I love all of it. I think it's just all awesome. We all are really in this together. And even though colleagues have different backgrounds and different strengths, everybody wants this. Everybody wants the same result. Everybody wants to make an unforgettable show, a show that people talk about around the world, that when you mention it, people are like, oh my God, I love this. My wife won't stop talking, whatever. That's what we want. We want to enrich the world we live in, and that we're in the business we're operating in.
As we round things up, I'd love to get your international perspective on the Australian market. And I think particularly I really want to know what sort of strengths and challenges you see in Australian screen stories right now. Where are we competing globally? Where are we missing opportunities? What can we do better?
Well, in the new age of TV, for different reasons, I think Australia has an important role to play, particularly now where we are with international drama, because what's happening in our industry is that it's contracting. Americans have cut because of, the content spending that went on for years and didn't prove itself on a subscription level for most of the streamers. And so all these cuts have come, and what a big part of cutting is making less shows. And because the American shows are very expensive and getting more and more expensive every year, to the point where they just can't make everything American, yet they still need more product and more content on these platforms, but they need to get it at a price that's more reasonable. And on the other hand, what's happening now is that they're really kind of not buying too much local language, right? Stuff that doesn't speak English. So all of a sudden, there's this new realm of English-speaking shows that can be done at a cost outside the US and possibly the UK that could feed into the streaming business if done at a cost, and yet they're on a premium level, back to square one. So there's a real opportunity here. People who will be able to generate premium level shows from outside of the US at a cost are going to be big winners of this new era. And so when you think about it, Australia is really well positioned to be that, because it has great incentives. It's an English-speaking country. It has fantastic talent, very good writers. It has excellent producers as far as knowing how to execute shows on the ground. And they've been servicing also big US productions over the years. There is the fantastic technical crews and everything, really just everything needed, a dream of a place to work. The one thing that I think is still not cracked 100% on the original side is how these shows also, some of them are developed. There's definitely some cases over the years that we've seen of shows that pop up, like Colin from Accounts, that is doing very well overseas some years back. But The Slap, when it came out, it was a very noisy piece, and it got remade also in the US. And so we've seen over the years, some cases like that, but it's it's hard to build a consistency when you look at that graph. When you compare the amount of global hit, recognizable shows, the report card of Australia in scripted TV versus Israel, for instance, as a 10 million non-English speaking country, Israel is number 3 in the world, at least until the war. But I'm sure it'll go back when the dust settles. Right now, it's obviously a sensitive time. But Israel was number 3 after the U.S., the U.K. Then came Israel and content exports. So, a small non-English country snuck in there into the list. It has a lot to do with development. They're not getting paid more money over there. They're getting paid less money than Australian writers on every level. So it's something also about the process. It's something about what we choose to develop and how we develop it. Maybe in Australia, we're not paying enough for a script. Maybe we're not paying enough for a script, and then we have to compensate by paying for development. Right, by paying, not for development, excuse me, for like developing a pitch, something that in many instances is not paid for many times, right? It's certainly not in America, right? The writer works on a pitch, generally speaking, and then we go out and pitch it. If they get the job, they get paid nicely for the script. So that's all included in that work. An Australian writer, many writers tell me in different places in the world, including Australia, well, yeah, but that approach doesn't work here, because even if we sell the script, there's not so much money waiting on the other side. So in many ways, it's like, why should we take a risk and working for free if there's really, there's no way to monetize that on the other end? I get it. I really get it. I think they're right too. So in a perfect world, I would have upped the script price and would have lost the need to pay for somebody to write a pitch document. To me, there's a paralyzing effect in that, right? That you have to go and pay a writer to get a pitch. If a writer is excited about a story, they're going to sit around and wait 6 months for a government fund, a development fund to come through, and then they're going to write the pitch? I mean, are they even going to remember the pitch by then? If I have an idea, I go to the computer and I want to start writing. I don't care who's paying, who's not. I gotta get out of my system. First of all, I gotta put it on the page. Hopefully somebody's gonna pay. Here, I know it's not exactly like that, but many times it feels like, well, writers are not even coming to the table and not even going to the computer until they understand there's a financial transaction. Understood completely. It's their job. They need to get paid for it. But something about this system feels a little bit paralyzing and less, there's less freedom there. And it's possible that kind of looking at using more government funding for new writers, for young and new writers, to help them make their first steps in the business. Writers that are going to be harder to find producers for them to work with. That makes sense to me. But if writers are established and they know what they're doing, should be able to develop and be paid enough money on a script side to justify even a free pitch, or they shouldn't be needing to wait for government money to develop. There's just stuff to look at as to how to best support the writing process and how to best support the development process. And you want the government to help, but you want it to help in a way that it's not going to create a dependency program for writers, because sometimes this dependency feels like it's getting in the way of creativity too. We don't have writers' rooms to crack pitches. There's usually the one person, or unless they're a team. But that's it. It's one person that came with the idea, and they're going to build the whole thing with us. They don't come to us and say, great, you like the idea? Fantastic. Now open a room for me with 3 other of my friends, and we're going to work it out for you. Like, no, we don't. We don't do that. We don't have the money to do that. I can't see any issues with the Australian business as far as producing, as far as all that stuff, incentives. But it's possible that, once again, the developments are not reaching the levels that they need to reach for different reasons on the ground. And that's where I would put my focus the best way we can as far as the story development. And again, it's not to say that in America, every time we develop something, it's just perfect. Of course not. It's not an exact science, but you got to come to it with this somewhat of a humility around it, and just to say it's a process. It's a process, and I have to have the patience for it because that's what's going to make it shine.
So great talking to you. Really insightful, thoughtful. Thank you for your time. I always finish off the podcast asking people to pitch one big idea that they think would make the industry better for all of us. So What's your big idea?
The approach that I hope we're going to start seeing more is to find more approaches how to make scripted TV. And that we're going to start finding ways to finance them independently as well. There've been a lot of talk about that, but mostly we still stick to the classic model of, developing stuff with broadcasters, which is understandable. We need partners and we need broadcasters, but I would have loved to see more innovation on how to finance and how to make shows for producers to retain more and more IP and to own more of their shows. I think we're up for much more innovation. Then now we have 5 buyers in America, something like that. And 10 years ago, we had like 20. So, I mean, at this rate, we're going to be left with 3. We're going to have to find new and innovative ways of how to make these shows. Otherwise, everybody in the business is going to be dependent on 3 buyers, yay or nay. That's not very ideal. So I think it's going to happen. It's going to be pushed in that direction, that you'll see between technology and stuff that's happening, that there is going to be some new innovation on how to make these TV shows not just the quote unquote regular way. So I hope we're going to find more and more of these new models on how to make these things work beyond the ones we know right now.
I absolutely agree. I think it's a time for innovation, and I'm an optimist always. So I think, as you said earlier, there's a contracting market, but within that there are incredible opportunities, and
I think so
to
too.
rethink the model is one of them.
I think so too. I think, maybe having had too much money and spending it too quickly was not the best idea. I mean, maybe when you're short for money and you really have to be calculating more, maybe sometimes there are some advantages to it, that you're pushed against the corner and you have to be innovative and say, okay, how can I make the same show for a quarter of the price, a third of the price? What's the model for that? I mean, the fact that we're even having these conversations in the US today is fantastic, because it means finally people are stepping and they're starting to think about it as a real business that they need to really lower the cost of. So I find all of it to be very encouraging, at least within the reality that we're experiencing, that at least it's pushing us to have these innovative conversations, both with the big conglomerates and independently. So I love it, and I hope we'll see much more of it.
Alon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. Always.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions. Always was, always will be.
This episode was brought to you by Screen Vixens, Expanding Media and Crew HQ.